What's up, guys? I usually give you a bit more of a countdown, but for some reason you didn't get one today. But I guess it might be because things are moving fast. Speaking of which, we held back because of Halloween. We figured the adults in the neighborhood might have to be out with the kiddos, and it was a good thing we did that because we were able to wait for the trade deadline, which was probably the most exciting trade deadline we've seen in the NFL in a while, and yet still not as exciting as the NBA. But we did see some moving and shaking. So, where do you guys want to start? Did you want to do a quick DFS recap, or did you want to get right into these trades and circle back and do the recap after
Let's do the recap out of the way real quick. It won't take long. Like my basic overview from Sunday was a lot of good plays. Like there were a lot of really good plays. I think our lineups did pretty well. There were a few weird spots that I'm still trying to figure out if I made a mental mistake, a process mistake, or if it was just bad numbers by the industry. But really, I think everything went about how, like, the games went about how I thought they would. So my player pool was pretty dead on. I had plenty of McCaffrey and Henry. I had Foreman and DJ Moore. I didn't have the right combos, but I feel good about that. Now, there's mistakes I made with like Josh Jacobs and Kenneth Walker, and why did I think they were the two like highest owned and best running back plays when they ended up being the two worst plays? That I have to figure out. But that may not have anything to do with process. That might just be those guys underperformed.
Yeah, I actually think Walker was a good play. We got it very unlucky. The way I would look at this is maybe I'm wrong, and maybe our viewers can look back and they can have their opinions and they can leave it in the comment section as well if you disagree. And it's not to say we got everything right, but I look at this week as a good learning lesson. I look at it like we packed a really good basket to go on a picnic, and we were expecting sunshine, and we had all the right inventory. We had all the good snacks. We had the grapes. We had the cheese. We had the wine. We were ready to barbecue, and it just rained. We had all the right ingredients. We just put it in the wrong order. I was on a lot of the right plays. I just had them in the wrong lineup. Like my Ellinger lineup had McCaffrey, but it didn't have Tony Pollard. My Tony Pollard lineup had Matthew Stafford with Van Jefferson. Had I had the right players in the right lineup, it would have worked. Like I was on the right plays, I just didn't have the right correlation. And that's on me. I mean, that's a decision I made. I click the buttons. We always talk about
exactly.
You're the one who clicks the buttons. Like I'm not saying, oh, this isn't like a hindsight 2020 thing. Oh, I got screwed by the DFS gods. No. I'm just saying I think we had the basket. I think we had the food. I think we had the right preparation. I just think it rained. I think it was just one of those unfortunate weeks where you did everything right. It just the forecast didn't forecast the way we needed it to go. But
exactly.
There's going to be weeks where we forecast things to go another way, and they break our way. Where we expect it to be a cold fall Halloween evening, and all of a sudden, it's 75 degrees in the Midwest, and you can take off your shirt on Halloween. That's what it was last night, where a lot of people, didn't expect that to happen. So, some weeks these things are just going to happen. Was there anything that you felt uncomfortable about, Donnie, this week?
This week, well, for the lineup we made off stream, we put Van Jefferson in, and that was the only receiver that we felt like we could afford and stuff. I didn't love that play, but it was the only thing we could do. to make
Right.
them work.
Now, hindsight should have said, oh, well, on the showdown slate, N'Keal Harry was getting a lot of targets. If we had put him in there, he scored a touchdown. But, like, I don't think any of us were on N'Keal Harry. So, again, you could say, oh, if I would have done this, it would have been an extra 10 points. But were you really going to do it? And the answer is no. I still think given the opportunity, Van Jefferson was the right play. It's just he didn't see a target. I would go back to Van Jefferson this week with Cooper Kupp being banged up. I'd go right back to it. Similar to how I went right back to Monter St. Brown this week. Last week, he got hit in the head. The NFL's been very diligent about concussions, and so he was ruled out. This week, he played the whole game. He looked a lot healthier. He got 14 points. So sometimes you can't be afraid to go right back to the plays. Is there any plays that you would go right back to even though they failed last week, Guff?
I mean, I probably would play Kenneth Walker again. Same thing with Chris Olave. I think both of those guys are still in prime positions where in the right matchup they will smash.
I would agree with that because Walker had a long touchdown today. So he has
I think Jacobs was fool's gold. That's what's really making me mad is that I was playing Jacobs when I clearly should have been playing Kamara in the same range, same price. But I feel like I was following ownership, and that's that. Yeah,
I'm about to get off of Adams too, not because of talent. It's just I think the Raiders might have given up on the season. If I'm being quite frank. The passion isn't there. It seems like maybe they're not complete sellers. Like we're going to transition very soon into the trade deadline. Maybe they're not complete sellers in the season. It just seems like they've kind of lacked the motivation recently. Similar to the Denver Broncos. I love Judy's talent. It's just Denver doesn't look right. And so sometimes you have to identify when a team just doesn't look right. Anything else you want to take from the slate?
No, that's a real quick overview. I'm ready to go on to week 9 now at this point.
Well, because we could break it down, like we could recap last week. But one of my main things, and I told the guys one of the reasons we didn't do a show yesterday was because I want to give you guys the best content. Like, I don't care if I come on here and show you a week where I win or I lose. I mean, I have no problem being transparent. It's just, I knew the trade deadline was coming up. I knew it was Halloween. It just made more sense to hold off and do a show because I do think the trade deadline and the trade impact on DFS is going to be way stronger this week than anything we learned from the recap of last week. I think these trades have a lot to do with the branding of how we're going to build lineups this week. So why don't we just transition right into that? Donnie, do you have a screen share we can share? I think we set that up so we don't miss any trades. But initially, did you guys see any trades that are definitely going to have DFS impact?
I think the Hawkinson one's going to have a decent DFS impact. I know you play him a decent amount. So just a quick question. How does Hawkinson being traded, I know he was one of your favorite plays at tight end usually. Is he something you avoid now because I know you don't like Kirk, or is it still the same?
Well, we have to know about the Smith injury and the fact that they traded.
Well, he's out 6 to 8 weeks, I think they said.
Right. The fact that they traded Hawkinson, or for Hawkinson, I should say. I need to make this a bit smaller, I noticed. But since they have traded Hawkinson, one thing I know about this is it has to be serious. And you said 6 to 8 weeks. That makes sense. Because I think the Lions got a really good haul to be able to get as much as they did. To get a second-round pick for a guy that Dan Campbell said, and Dan Campbell used to play tight end, said, I like his receiving, but I don't think he's a complete tight end. And I don't think he's fast enough just to be a receiving tight end. That was kind of Dan Campbell's overview. It's like you either got to be a more complete tight end like a Kittle, or you got to get like, better receiving optionality. And although we saw some big blow up weeks, I think he's kind of stuck in the middle. And maybe a more run heavy scheme is going to fit him in Minnesota very well. So I think it's a good trade for both teams. So what do you think about the trade?
I think it works out. Like Minnesota needed that without Irv because it looks like from what I've seen, their offense needs that tight end to make sure it can run the way this guy wants. So that seems to be smart for them. I think Detroit's fine to move off of him since he was probably not going to get paid. Get some picks, keep rebuilding the team. They've been smart doing it. So I think that's a very solid trade. And Hawkinson should be fantasy relevant immediately in that Minnesota offense.
Yeah, and he's been injury prone recently. That's one of the reasons we did draft 2 tight ends. In the recent years, we drafted Brock Wright, who's more of a blocking tight end, but then we drafted this kid named James Mitchell, excuse me, from Virginia, who was coming off an ACL injury. They think he would have been like a early second-round pick had he not been hurt. He came back last week, played with Hawkinson as the number 2 tight end. So expect him to get more run. I want to say he's like 6'5", 260, and has more of an athletic build than Hawkinson did. So I know they're high on him. Losing Hawk as a complete tight end does kind of hurt, but it was almost widely known he wasn't going to sign back with the Lions. So Donnie, to come full circle, what do you think about the trade?
I mean, it makes sense for both teams, especially if Hawkinson's not going to re-sign with you and you know that. The second and third round pick is good. I just don't like that it's an in-division trade. I think you take less to keep him out of your division if you really think he's as good as he is. But maybe the Lions don't think he has that.
You got to explain that to me. Why would you take a less to keep him out of your division?
Well, he's a good player. He's going to have an impact in games against you. You play him twice a year. He probably, will have good games against you, have 100-yard games, have 2 touchdown games. It just, you always make the price higher for division.
See, I disagree. I think that's an old man's way of thinking. To me, it's like one of the things that you take the best value you can get. And as much as Hawkinson might know you, I think you're just as motivated to play against him. Wouldn't you agree or no?
I don't think there's much motivation. Like 2 years down the line, I don't think there's much motivation for the Lions to play against Hawkinson. Maybe the next time the Lions and the Vikings play, it's like interesting, but I don't think there's a huge motivation factor there.
Fair enough, but then wouldn't that then lean itself to just making the best deal? So if the Vikings did offer the best deal, then the division thing doesn't really matter. I don't know. I never really bought the division impact as much as some people do.
Well, we agree to disagree there. I think there's for a player at Hawkinson's level, I think.
See, I agree with the divisional impact. I don't think Hawkinson's that level of a player where that matters.
I would agree.
You definitely don't trade your studs in division. You would never trade your quarterback. Like, even as bad as Goff is, you'd never trade Goff to Green Bay or Chicago or anything at this point. Like, you would never do that. But Hawkinson, as good as he may be, he's like a middle of the pack tight end, to be honest. He'll have his good weeks. He's a good receiving tight end. He's an okay blocker. He's very consistent, but like that's all he is. He's not anything special where I'd worry about, we're going to have to play this guy 7 or 8 times over the rest of his career. Like, no, it's not like it's a quarterback or a star wide receiver or something like that.
Well, funny enough, I don't know if you guys know this, But one of the reasons we got Jamison Williams is because we made a trade with the Vikings in the draft, trade up to get Jamison Williams. So we have made this in-division trade before for what we consider to be an impact player. We haven't seen Jamison Williams yet, but for some reason the Vikings trade hotline with the Vikings has been open. So at least I would say Brad Holmes is kind of on my level. It doesn't really care about the divisional impact. I don't know which one of us is right, Donnie. You might be right. It's just I think that's an overblown proportion if the value is so much better on the other side. And I just think the Vikings overpaid. I think they overreacted to the tight end being out, and I think the Lions jumped on the opportunity. It's not just that I don't think Hawkins is talented. I just think he was drafted by the old regime at Patricia in the first round. I think that was a mistake to draft him that early, and to regroup a second and some additional, I think is the best you were going to get. We can move on to the next trade now, the next impact trade. Was there any that you felt was like especially fantasy relevant?
I don't know about fantasy relevant, but the Miami trades, both sides, where they acquired Jeff Wilson from San Fran, but they did that to replace Chase Edmonds, who they traded with a first-round pick for Bradley Chubb from Denver. So, like, they made their defense better and basically kept their run game the same. So Miami's making moves, but giving up that first-round pick, like, they're going for broke.
Hold on. They still have a first-round pick because
they still have their first-round pick.
Yeah.
They traded the one they
from
got from San Francisco. Yeah.
So that's a big thing that they're able to keep. See, now I personally think if you're going to go for broke and say we're going to try and contend this year, you trade your pick and keep the Niners pick.
Well, no, because I mean, to be fair, both picks were probably going to, if you do anything, both picks are going to be about the same.
Yeah,
because both teams have a shot of making that pick 30 or 31 or 32. But more realistically, they're both playoff teams, and they like both are going to be picked somewhere between 22 and 30, depending on how well they do in the playoffs.
See, I think this
realistically, that's what it is.
But I think this is more fantasy relevant for CMC. I think, especially if you're a season-long owner of CMC, or you just like CMC, I think it opens up the door. It takes away a goal line guy for your goal line touches. So CMC is probably going to get more green zone touches with 49ers. That's the way I would attack this one.
Oh, no, yeah. They clearly are willing to go all in on CMC. Or, like, if not, then, like, they know that whatever they get from Elijah Mitchell or Davis Price is going to be perfect behind CMC. And, like, yeah, they're clearly going all in on that by getting rid of Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, I think people forget about that, too, Gov.
And then, of course, Miami's just picking up all the old San Fran running backs. They now have Mostert. They now have Jeff Wilson. Like, watch them have CMC in 3 years when he's up at contract.
I believe they have Trey Sermon, too, or they brought him in for a workout.
No, Sermon is on Philly.
Is he on Philly?
Yes. They still have Myles Gaskin. So, like, they clearly were willing to trade Chase Edmonds and keep Myles Gaskin.
Let's talk about what we think of the Tony trade, the one that happened a couple of days ago to Kansas City, because I do think that's going to have some fantasy impact.
I honestly don't know. Like, that's the one where, like,
this could be a boom type situation, or it could be nothing.
I think they wanted Sky Moore to be their version of Tony, and Sky Moore just didn't develop to that level yet. Yeah. And you know what? We're not going to get a Tyreek Hill, but we need that kind of weaponality. We need that kind of optionality.
See, and I don't like. It's really hard for me to take injury. Like, how do I put this? I weigh injury-prone guys right out of college very heavily badly. Like, I skew that like, the fact that Tony is in his rookie year and can't get healthy is not good. At least Sky Moore's been able to practice and be on the field.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, that's my problem. Like, I now have to see Tony do stuff because I don't believe he'll hold up long enough to do anything.
Well, here's the thing that I think is good for them, though. Andy Reid already said they're willing to wait till he is comfortable with the playbook and stuff to even play him.
Right.
So he's not going to see the field for a bit.
They'll do it like Josh Gordon last year when they took their shot on him. Like, he was on the team for like 6 weeks before he finally started getting like 10 snaps a game and occasional throw here or there. And that's what they'll probably do with Tony. They'll let him be on the line for like 5 or 6 weeks while he learns the playbook and gets healthy. And then if he's not healthy enough to get on the field by the end of the year, he probably is just going to be a lost cause.
So I do think he's going to be like a showdown darling for one of these like late playoff push kind of slate. I'm talking like wild card weekend, week 17, week 18. Like, I'm just saying, I know, like I told you guys, I like to dig into the weeds a bit in terms of like, I know we don't get a ton of, we're not a huge podcast yet. So we got to dig deep. We got to give you guys the nitty gritty. This is one of my takeaways. I do think Tony's going to make an impact late for the Chiefs.
Well, and here's the thing, though, with Tony. Like, if he gets 10 snaps in a playoff game, he has the talent where that one of those 10 snaps can be a game changer. That's all you need.
And I do think he could play like a Deebo Samuel type role where it's like maybe he's not big enough to be the same type of running back, but I do think he could kind of play that dual role where you do see him in motion a lot, maybe even getting some jet sweeps and that kind of thing. Like, honestly, I view him more as an offensive weapon than I do even a position.
Okay.
But
I just don't see it. Like, I'm probably heavily weighting the injury risk at this point.
Yeah, no, the injuries are big.
Especially coming right out of college. And I'm not talking about like getting injured in training camp. I'm like, I don't think Tony's been able to even do training camp all year because he's been slightly hamstringed since draft day. That's not good. That's where I have a problem. Like, Christian Watson, I don't have as much of a problem because he's going to have a lingering knee injury all year after hurting it in training camp. Tony was a darling, but they were already resting him and like pushing back during training camp to make sure he's healthy and ready to play. And that's a big red flag to me.
Did you know that Van Jefferson, and by the way, is 3,500 and Christian Watson is 3,512 this week. So we go from having no 3K wide receivers to two very, very interesting 3K targets this week. With all these trades,
Christian Watson is very interesting playing against Detroit this week.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we have a lot of we go from having no like options at the 3K level to like these trades, and some of these injuries have opened up some tremendous value. Guys like Claypool getting traded to the Bears. I don't even know if these guys aren't going to be able to accrue fantasy points, but they might help their quarterbacks. Like, I'm not saying I would play Claypool, but I am way more interested in playing Justin Fields now that he's gotten Harry and Claypool, because that allows Mooney to play more in the slot, which I think Mooney as a third option or like the slot guy exclusively opens up his value, because I don't like him as an outside receiver at all. But if he's going to be in the middle of the field as the guy taking up the slot, and then you put Harry and Claypool on the outside, even if they don't see the targets and they're just field switchers, I am more interested in Fields this week because of some of the trades.
Well, while we're on the topic of the Bears, they made 3 trades throughout the past week. The first one it looked like a complete seller move where they traded Robert Quinn to the Eagles, which was a fine trade. You get a 4th round pick back. Then a couple days later, you get the Roquan Smith trade.
Yeah, so they've traded away their defense. It's clear. Okay,
Yeah.
So you've now traded away 2 huge pieces of your defense. You're in rebuild. This is what you're doing. Okay, that's what you're going to do.
And then after you get those 2 trades today at the deadline, you get the random Chase Claypool trade. And it makes no sense. You just had gotten a 2nd round pick for Roquan, and now you're going to give up a 2nd for Claypool? Like, where's the value in that? Do we like? I get it. Yes, they also got a 4th round pick along with they got Klein and a 5th round pick for Roquan along with their 2nd. So you think essentially Claypool is worth the same value as what you got for Roquan?
I think Claypool is just as good as Smith, but I've been low on Smith. I think Smith is like a really good athletic player, but I don't think he's a good football player, if that makes sense. Like, I like Raekwon's physical abilities, but I don't think his fundamentals and technique have been terrible in the NFL.
But he's still, wrapping up the tackles and stuff. Yes, maybe he's not getting the interception numbers. Maybe he's not as great in coverage, but he's still stuffing the run at most points,
Like, his coverage for the most part has been bad, and his pursuit angles have been terrible. Now, he's super fast and he's super big, and like that overshadows some of his flaws fundamentally. But I saw him get ran over multiple times by older backs, including like a 41-year-old Adrian Peterson, just because he took the wrong angle like a year ago against the Lions. So it's like, as much good as I see from Roquan Smith, I see a lot of bad, and just his fundamentals and the way he attacks the ball. And that scares me from the linebacker position, because we're talking about green dot kind of players. I mean, you want your linebackers to have a lot of awareness. And as athletically gifted as Smith tends to be, above the shoulders, he doesn't always seem to be that way from a linebacker perspective. So I actually don't mind the Smith trade. And the Quinn trade makes sense as a trade. I don't think they should have ever signed him back, because I just think he's an aging defensive tackle who's showing decline. So I guess it's good that you got off him, but I never liked the contract to begin with. I think that contract is terrible.
Well, the contract wasn't great, I don't think, but last year he definitely had a resurgence out of nowhere.
He did.
And that definitely spiked his value up, and they got a good pick out of it, so I'm not going to complain. That they look like they made a smart move there.
I'd agree with that.
But like, again, let's not even mention the fact that you just hired a defensive coordinator to be your head coach. We could argue it, but 2 of your top 3 defensive players, probably, maybe at least 2 of your top 5 defensive players. And we're going to try and bolster up our offense. That doesn't correlate with what you've been doing at all.
So, Gov, is there any other trade deadline impacts that are going to impact this week, you think, in terms of, like, are these players able to acquire fantasy points?
Oh, yeah. They should be. Like, DraftKings will switch them. It's early enough in the week. They'll be able to accrue points on their games. Like, I like what Buffalo and Indy did, swapping running backs.
I think Hines could have a big impact on Buffalo's fantasy points, just because it's another guy to get the receiving targets.
Does it hurt Singletary or make him more valuable?
It hurts Singletary a lot.
I have no idea what it does, because they've been like, I don't know if it hurts Singletary as much as they know they need a better backup for James Cook, their rookie. Like I think this proves that they know James Cook is not good enough to be their like backup, in the times that he's gotten run in just their blowouts. And you already knew you'd had nothing really in Zach Moss. So getting Hines, I don't think it cuts into Singletary because Singletary wasn't a every down, every touch guy anyway. I think he'll still stay. I think he'll stay the lead back. I do think it does help the offense more because now they have a more consistent change of pace back.
I'm not going to lie. I think Zach Moss might see a resurgence for the Colts. I'm not totally ready to give up on his career.
I mean, it's just the thing. Running backs are so quickly replaced in the NFL, you never know. Like, you have 2 bad years as a running back and your career is almost over.
Yeah. Well, as much as I wanted the Hawkinson thing to work out with the Lions, I think on a year higher on Hawkinson's future prospects, where I might be higher on Zach Moss in the same way you are about Hawkinson. It's like some players I think do better where they change the scenery, and some players I just think like, oh, you were ready to give up on them. I think Zach Moss could potentially be exactly what Jonathan Taylor needed. Because I think Hines and Taylor were so different that, like, when Taylor got hurt this season, I think they needed someone like Moss, and they didn't have him on the roster. Now, Jackson came in and kind of gave him that surprising, like, undrafted, I'm this, like, unknown entity. But, like, I don't know. I think Zach Moss might pack more of a punch.
I think Hines could make just such a big impact with the Bills. He fits their scheme so well, in my opinion. No, I'm not saying he's going to come out here and be a big fantasy point scorer, but just to have an extra guy out there to spread the field for you as a receiving threat, we could see someone like, if there's injuries at receiver, less Jake Kumaro, more Nyheim Hines.
So so you're expecting more of like a James White role?
Yes.
I could maybe see that.
Okay. See, so who would you say would be a bigger fantasy impact on their team, maybe going into the playoffs? So you're playing more of those like showdown lineups or single entry lineups. Hines or would you do Tony? Like, who do you think? Trying to take away the team, or maybe you assume the Colts sneak in. Like, do you see Hines making that big of an impact, like as Tony is hopeful to make with the Chiefs, or is that too big of a leap?
I think this season, Hines definitely has a higher ceiling than Tony.
Fair enough.
We have to see how Tony's used. We don't know much.
Well,
I know how Hines is going to be used because all the Bills do is throw it 50 times a game.
Well, because as much as we want to give up on the Colts season, I mean, that division's still wide open. Nobody really has taken hold of it.
Titans are on, a 4-game win streak now? They're getting close to taking a hold of the division again.
They're getting close, but Willis didn't look good. And if Tannehill can't come back from an ankle injury, I don't think Willis is ready. But, who knows? Because the first week with P.J. Walker didn't look so great. And now P.J. looks like he might be having a Geno Smith-like resurgence. So you never do know.
An interesting last-minute trade as well that happened was Dean Marlowe to Buffalo. He's a safety for a 7th-round pick. It's small, but we did see Buffalo with a lot of safety injuries. Poyer's still banged up. Their young guys seemed like they were playing well. So
Can you click on Dean Marlowe for me? Because I believe he was drafted by the Bills.
He was.
So I believe they have familiarity with him.
I'm pretty sure he was.
I believe he was too. So if me and you both think the same thing, I'm pretty sure he was. They have familiarity with him.
Well, no, he was drafted. He was drafted by the Panthers, but played for the Bills for 3 years.
Okay. So he has played with the team. That was my point. And they needed safety help very badly. So I think that was a good move.
It's a small move that doesn't seem like it's much, but those little moves can be the difference on a Super Bowl run.
So, Gov, we didn't get your opinion on the defense. Whose defense do you think got better, the Ravens or the Eagles, from a fantasy perspective?
I mean, they both got better.
I think the Eagles got
the Ravens had more room to work because their defense was awful.
Fair enough. So, like going into this week, do you think any of the defensive moves will change how you attack a defense on the DFS slate?
Well, I know Roquan was really good over the middle, and that's one of the places Baltimore was really lacking. So
He's
I might not be attacking running backs against Baltimore, or at least the pass catching running backs against Baltimore as much. Yeah. I may need to wait a game before I just start really attacking them high percentages.
Well, I'd argue the Eagles defense, fantasy wise, might have gotten a lot better because you're having fresh legs to come in every so often. It's going to give more opportunities for sacks, I believe. And also with Quinn being at the level he's at, not saying he's like a Pro Bowler or anything close to that, but he's going to make an impact on games. He's going to add more ability to get sacks on quarterbacks. And the thing is, the Eagles lost Jordan Davis to an injury recently. I don't remember what it was, but I'm pretty sure he's out this upcoming week. So just getting more help on the D line is always good.
Mm-hmm. And the old adage is you can never have enough pass rushers. We're at the 36-minute mark, but I did want to do some evergreen content really quickly. Just to speak on, before we wrap up this weekend, that I think would be very, very beneficial for the people, is to speak on what makes DFS so fun and then where it can go wrong. Because this week, for example, I lost every one of my DK lineups on regular DraftKings, right? But I was able to hit a parlay bet on the Travis Etienne news with
Logan, can you change the screen? Sorry.
Oh, you're fine, man.
I just had an ad turn on, so.
Oh no, you're good. But with James Robinson getting traded, ETN became available, so I was able to find a ETN anytime touchdown score or 100 yards for plus 330. And I just want to speak on it really quickly, and we'll get Gov's opinion and the other guy's opinion on. You want to diversify your portfolio as much as you can in DFS, because you can never count on things, right? So whether that's playing in some tournaments, some cash games, sports betting, rainmakers, even trying to flash draft, doing the afternoon only, trying to enter as many single entries as you can, even playing the Sunday through Thursday contest goes. I think all those are very valuable. But I think a lot of times people get stuck in, oh, well, I've already lost X amount. I've already lost $20 every week on the $1 million maker, in the million, chasing the $1 million, the Millie contest was another 20. And then they get themselves in trouble. So we're at the midway point. Can you give some people some of your bankroll management kind of resurgence or tips or suggestions as we try to protect these people and just give them some experience knowledge that we've kind of accrued over the years? Anything you want to share with people?
Not really. I haven't seen, if there's anything I can take over the years, it's that most trades don't mean anything unless it's a major star. And I haven't seen a major star traded. The biggest major star trading is Calvin Ridley.
Well, no, I mean in a bankroll sense, we're at the midway point of it. And so some people are starting to run out of money. They might have, the luster might have rolled off. So if this is your first year in DFS and you haven't played a full season yet, how do you kind of manage expectations if the season hasn't really went your way? Do you change up your way of playing? Do you believe in your process? Like, do you have any kind of tips like that?
I mean, you have to trust your process through an entire season. That's the first thing. If this is your first time really doing it, you have to stick to your same process through a whole season to actually know what you're doing. You might be able to make little tweaks, but those are going to be based off of what teams are doing this year.
Mm-hmm.
And usually by week 8, those are also factored into projections. So if you are paying for a good source for projections, that's being accounted for, and you just sort of have to trust yourself on it at that point. And then at the end of the season, as we do and evaluate week to week, at the end of the season, you can evaluate your entire season. Just like at the end of this year, I will evaluate my entire year, all sports, and see what I've done. And see where my ups and downs are there. And then I will make some adjustments.
I agree with you on the process thing. I do think, like, for example, single entries are so much more valuable that, so instead of entering 5 times in the 20 max, for example, maybe playing a single entry afternoon only slate is more valuable because it's still single entry. And yes, there's less games and the prize pool might be lower, but you got to get less things right as well. So if you still use the same process play and you still correlate things and you get the single entry advantage, I think you should kind of start to experiment with things like that. As Donnie has started to experiment with just DFS in general and learning process, don't be afraid to try something new. Don't just chase the lottery ticket, plays because that's what you did in week 1. Trust your process, but be willing to adapt to it and try, just have fun with DFS. At this point, don't get bogged down by oh, I haven't won X amount. I would treat it like fun. And if you're not having fun, it might be just time to take a week off. There's no shame in taking a week off if you're not feeling it.
That's true.
There should still be fun at the end of the day. One of the biggest things I enjoy is just getting on with these guys and talking every Friday night. I look forward to it. It's like my night at the bar, or my game night with my friends, or my Friday at the movies. That's how I view it. I don't get out of control. But if it's one of those things that if you're an alcoholic, then going to the bar wouldn't be good. If you're addicted to food, then going out to the restaurant wouldn't be good. So I won't promote gambling if it doesn't fit your lifestyle. But if you can manage your expectations, I do think experimenting with different slates and contests is a good way to get a little different while still keeping the same process. So is there anything else you guys want to mention, or do you want to just wrap up with a shorter show today? I think keeping it compacted and information-based was still good. We'll still join you guys Friday night as we do our big lineup breakdown. We might even have some special guests coming up in the future shows. We're in the talks with some people, bring on some interesting new voices and see if they can add to some of our pillars and some of our lineups, because I do think that's one of our biggest advantages is just how much fun we had building these lineups at the end of the week. But is there anything currently you guys think we should hit on?
I don't have anything else specifically NFL related at all, no.
Nope.
All right, guys. Well, we'll see you on Friday as we build some lineups. We have the sponsorship of the Record Eagle. The guy wants to come on. He profiled Adam Troutman in high school, so he can give us some insight into how his NFL career has went. He's talked about joining us. We have some DFS people that talked about joining us. So our little podcast that started off so small and kind of didn't know what direction it was going in is starting to really round into shape. So we'll see you guys on Friday. Take care. Be safe. And hopefully you enjoyed the trade deadline as we saw a different version of the NFL start to emerge. I do think some of these trades will have a big DFS impact. So we'll see you guys on Friday. Have a good one. Be safe.
Peace out, everyone.
Bye, everyone.